Mila, for inviting me to do this. And I'd like to introduce to you our panelists, right? Starting with Paula Abreu, who spent over a decade programming shows and festivals, diversifying bills with a wide range of forward-thinking international acts. At Summer Stage, she is responsible for booking and curating programs focusing on global music and jazz performances. Paula has a commitment to creating change. In 2019, she spearheaded and delivered Summer Stage's Gender Parity Pledge, turning the festival into one of the first in the US to accomplish such critical balance. Before Summer Stage, Paula worked at the Red Hot organization and Lincoln Center and was inspired to pursue a career in the arts after working on a business project for 6 months in Angola. She holds a master's in performing arts administration from NYU. She's from Rio de Janeiro, and Abreu has been calling New York City home since 2010. Welcome, Paula. I would also like to introduce Betania Gomes, who is a Brazilian dancer from Rio de Janeiro too, and started to dance at the age of 13 under Consuelo Rios at Rio de Janeiro Municipal Theater School, which is one of the most prestigious schools we have for dance in Rio. And I'm glad to say, I started dancing there too, and it was my home for like 15 years. But at that point, it was during this time that Betania attended a masterclass with Dance Theater of Harlem, meeting Arthur Mitchell and solidifying her desire to join the company. In 1990, she traveled to the United States and auditioned for the Dance Theater of Harlem School, where she studied before joining the company in 1992 as an apprentice. Was promoted to the rank of soloist in 2001 and principal dancer just 1 year after, reportedly becoming the first Black Brazilian dancer to reach the highest rank in an international company. Gomes continued her teaching career with the Dance Theater of Harlem, dancing through barriers, teaching at PS 210 and Community Health of the Heights. Gomes works as a dance instructor, ballet coach, and choreographer at the Dance Theater of Harlem. And also is a daughter of Beatriz Nascimento, one of our greatest feminist activists in Brazil and one of Brazil's proud women. We are very proud to have Beatriz Nascimento opening so many doors. And Mila Burns, our beloved author, who I also had the pleasure to be a student in her class of culture and Cold War in Latin America, and which was life-changing for a musician. So thank you so much. And I'd like to pass to you the mic so you can introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about the writing of the book.
Thank you so much, Gianna. Thank you, Kathy. It's really an honor to be here. This book, as you probably know, Sorriso Negro was released roughly 2 years ago. And at that point, we had it all sorted out. We would have an event in New York, in a bookstore in person, and the city closed. So we didn't manage to do pretty much anything. But the two speakers that I had in mind back then were precisely Betania and Paula. So for me, having the opportunity of having them here with us, especially here at the Graduate Center and as Clecos, as Kathy said, which is home for me, is really a pleasure and an honor. I talked about this book in multiple places already at this point during these 2 years at NYU, Duke, Illinois, Lehman College, where I teach. So it's really great to finally be taking the book to the GC the way I envisioned it at first. Dona Ivone is someone who has been close to me for a very long time. I wrote my first book about her, but about her, not about an album. It was way more an analysis and anthropological work of her as a woman in a very machista, very misogynistic environment, which is the samba universe in Brazil, samba, the national rhythm of Brazil. So I'm going to share my screen just because I prepared a very short presentation in case some of you don't know a lot about Dona Ivone. So I'm going to share my screen and play a few songs, maybe two, in versions that those of you who have attended previous talks about the book have not heard, hopefully. So I'll make it a little different. And as I said, it all began with working with Dona Ivone, and I had this invitation from Bloomsbury Academic to write about this specific album of hers. At this point, I was doing research on Brazilian dictatorship and its connections to the dictatorship in Chile specifically, but in South America in general. And I felt that that was already too far for me to deal with. And the editor of this series, Jason Staniak, said, no, actually, you can do it as a historical piece of work in which you're going to put it in perspective related to the time when it was released. And I have to say, it was released in 1981, when the Brazilian dictatorship, military civilian dictatorship, was going through a period of almost fading, almost ending, an opening, and a moment when left-wing movements started to address questions that since 64, when the regime started, were not really discussed in Brazil, including gender inequality and racial issues. Because even for leftists at that point, that was out of discussion. Like, the main objective had to be removing the regime and going back to democracy. So why would we add to that tensions such as gender and race issues? Dona Ivone, during this period, as a woman and a Black woman in Brazil, was really doing a lot. She was not fully dedicated to her musical career, although for many, she's still seen as a genius, probably one of the most brilliant composers in Brazil. But she was focusing on a steady job, worked as a social worker and a nurse, and was already breaker in this career as an assistant to Dr. Nise da Silveira. For those of you who are also not familiar with her work, there's a movie about her, Nise, N-I-S-E, on Netflix. You can watch it. And but for me, it was always hard because I had conducted a bunch of interviews with Dona Ivone. We had barbecues at her home, lunch together multiple times. I was with her in some recordings and concerts, and she always made it very clear to me that she was not a political being. She was not into politics. She was not engaged with any of those things. And yet, she releases an album called Sorriso Negro in 1981, talking about Black pride, talking about gender equality. So how can I reconcile that, right? When this book was translated into Portuguese and became this book last year, I gave a few interviews, and in some of them, people asked, you should just call her an activist, because that's what she was. But she never called herself an activist. And someone as brilliant, as amazing as Dona Ivone, making clear that she was not an activist, she was not into politics. How could I dare giving her a role, a title that she didn't give herself, right? So I developed this concept of resistance by existence just to try to deal with the gigantic human being and the gigantic impact that this woman has promoted in the musical sphere in Brazil. And I say in the book that resistance by existence is not merely an oppositional act, but the combination of a highly conscious existence with a tremendous impact on power relations, reshaping intersubjective understanding and transforming society. I know it seems very bold, but if you know a little bit about Dona Ivone Lara's musical career, you know that that's precisely what she did. As a journalist in Brazil, I interviewed many people about samba and asked them about women in samba. And that's when I had the first idea of writing my first book. Because whenever I asked about women in samba, they cited Dona Ivone Lara. And that was it. That was the end. And is there anyone else? Maybe Beth Carvalho. But Beth Carvalho, she's not a composer. She was a singer, a great singer, as well as many other women. So they had this role of being inspiring songs, being muses, or being singers, or even in the samba schools, the role of chia, which is someone who has some authority, but not not the power of, you know, making decisions or anything. So for me, this was an important aspect of Dona Ivone Lara's career. And the fact that she's dealing with gender inequality here without being an activist is for me very clear. She has a bunch of songs in the album that are connected to women empowerment. A Sereia ao Mar, Alguém Me Avisou, Nunca Mais, Meu Fim de Carnaval Não Foi. Meu Fim de Carnaval and Nunca Mais are two songs in which she actually plays with gender roles. In Brazil, we don't have the neutral gender language, and in these songs, it's totally neutral. It's up to you to figure out if the person who is singing is male or female, which is very tricky. It was a moment when composers were actually playing with this a lot, including Chico Buarque. So Dona Ivone releases this album using this kind of joke, kind of language. I'm gonna play a little bit of Alguém Me Avisou now, which is a song that also demonstrates another aspect of this empowerment that you see in this album. Dona Ivone has Maria Bethânia singing in the album, who was at the time the first woman to sell more than 1 million copies of an album in Brazil, was the impersonation of female power during the dictatorship, having sang Carcará and becoming an icon of force, really. And she invites Maria Bethânia to sing A Sereia ao Mar in this album and writes Alguém Me Avisou for Maria Bethânia, which is a song talking about I'm getting to an environment, and when I get there in an environment where I know I'm not necessarily welcomed, I tread lightly. And she will say that this is for Maria Bethânia, but this is very autobiographical too. And some of there saying that actually she was referring to Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil, Caetano being Maria Bethânia's brother, who are into exile at that point because of the dictatorship. So I picked a version in which Caetano Veloso is singing Alguém Me Avisou. Let's listen to just a little bit of it.
Eu vim de lá, pequenininho. Mas eu vim de lá, pequenininho. Alguém me avisou pra pisar nesse chão devagarinho. Alguém me avisou pra pisar nesse chão devagarinho. Eu vim de lá, pequenininho. Mas eu
Oh, and that one doing the backing vocals was André Lara. I hadn't noticed the first time. Dona Ivone Lara's grandson, who is also a musician and a good friend of mine. So this is something that was very important and very clear there, that she was giving a message of what her life was like, having to adapt to that. And again, I'm so sorry for interrupting Caetano Veloso with my terrible voice, but I just had to do it. You can Google it afterwards. And if you're not familiar with his work, it's also worth checking. There's actually a profile of his, I think 2 weeks ago, the New Yorker profiled him, and it's fabulous. I highly recommend it. Lastly, this is also an album that talks a lot about Black pride. And one thing that for me makes it clear is that Dona Ivone picks Sorriso Negro, Black Smile, as the title of the album. And Dona Ivone was someone who was very proud of her compositions, not of her singing, not of her dancing, although she was a tremendous singer and a tremendous dancer. She was proud of her writing. And as we know, this is the aspect for me, as I already said, that is the most intriguing one. That is the hardest one for a woman, especially at this time in Brazil, to achieve, because we're talking about producing knowledge. We're talking about the work of an intellectual, right? And Dona Ivone is there, very proud of her compositions, but choosing Sorriso Negro, which is one of the few songs she did not compose, to be the title of the album. And this is the moment of Movimento Negro Unificado in Brazil, of Grêmio Recreativo de Arte Negra, a kind of organization among some samba composers and players focusing on activism and on Black pride. And she records Axé de Anga, which is very connected to Angola and her African roots, a song that she even sings in the Bantu languages at some points. And she records Sorriso Negro with Jorge Ben, who is another character of Brazilian music that people forget that was an activist. People tend to talk about him as someone who actually didn't engage in activism and criticize him for that. But in 1976, he had released an album called África Brasil. If that's not activism, I have no idea what it is. But again, I'm not saying he's an activist. He didn't say it, but there's something there. And there's an act of resistance, of questioning, of discussing something. And what I wanted with this concept and with this book was really to bring to the table the idea that someone can have multiple ways of impacting society, not necessarily the traditional definitions of activism that we have. And I'm glad that we're going to hear a little more from Betânia Gomes, because her mom had a very different approach to activism, was one of the brightest intellectuals in Brazil, and had a very different approach to activism that was also impactful. But what I mean by that is that they're activisms, right? There are multiple ways of creating impact. And to close, I'm going to show you a quick video of Sorriso Negro. Many people don't know that Dona Ivone didn't compose this song. They still think that this song was hers. And this song is actually sang in a church in Bahia nowadays, in da Igreja do Rosário dos Santos, which is a syncretic church, if I can use this word, a church, a Catholic church, but that has a lot of African heritage, a lot of candomblé really embraced in the ceremonies there. So I'm gonna play Dona Ivone singing Sorriso Negro with Jorge Ben. I was going to play them singing in the church, but I did that in other presentations. And I just feel that this version is just too good not to be played today.
Da liberdade, país da liberdade. Sorriso negro, abraço negro, felicidade, sempre. Sem sossego, e negra raiz da liberdade. O sorriso negro, abraço negro.
This is Jorge Benjor singing with Dona Ivone Lara, Sorriso Negro, in which she says that black or blackness, or however you want to translate it, because the word can mean the color, black, or a person of African heritage in Brazil, is the root of freedom. So with that, Gianna, maybe you can continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mila. And I was writing down exactly that. Blackness or black is the root of freedom, because like the first phrase, the first lines of these songs is exactly that. And that song was the title of the album. So yeah, that is pretty something. That is pretty something. I would like to first ask for Paula Abreu. I'm trying to see Paula here. Or Betânia.
I'm here.
Okay. Okay. A lot of people on my screen. To talk about a little bit about this idea of like one thing that we could see in this presentation is that even though she doesn't consider herself a feminist or an activist or anything other than a musician, a nurse, a social worker, and a mother and a wife, she did a lot. She did a lot. Like, it's just the fact that she was the first woman to compose a samba enredo, which is like, if you compose samba by itself, it's already something very, very environment of only men doing, right? And I think like it's still to say in samba enredo, it's the samba specific for the parades, and she composed one of the best ones that up to this day, if people are asked like which were one of the best sambas, and Os Cinco Bailes da História do Rio, it's one of the everyone knows it's still a mark, and she was the one that did that, even though she was not trying to break any rules. She was not trying to like be an activist, but just by doing that, she was getting there. And I want to know, because I think it's amazing that you you have such an important role at Summer Stage, because programming is by itself, and I was just thinking about this in one of my PhD seminars this Tuesday, how political programming is. You know, programming musicians, programming artists, and presenting that to the audience. And also the idea that you are working now in a place that is 50-50, it's like equally gendered. And how, talk a little bit about all this experience here and being a Latina and doing all of this here. So.
Thank you so much, Gianna. Thank you, Mila, for inviting me to this very special event. And congratulations on the book. I'm a huge fan. Thank you for the short presentation too. That's great. So yeah, thank you, Gianna, for bringing this up, that programming. I think I completely agree with you. It can be very political. And I'll tell, I know you thank you for sharing my bio, but I'll tell a little bit of my background just to give some more context as well. And then the work we do and how I can see programming as an important tool to, you know, try to shape society. So I came from Brazil. I've been living in New York for 12 years now. I feel as an immigrant, I'm one of the creators now of Summer Stage, where I started at the bottom. I started as an assistant and built my way to working as a curator. And I feel that on my day-to-day as Summer Stage, the fact that I'm an immigrant and I'm a woman, I am reminded of this every single day in my work interactions. And I think that says a lot about like the, you know, the fights and the barriers that we have in the industry. Before coming to the US, I lived in Angola for 6 months. And that completely changed my perspective of what culture means and what culture, the impact of culture in our lives. So when I came back to Brazil, I decided to move to New York, to the US, to pursue my studies in performing arts administration. And again, I bring not only my background as an immigrant, as a Brazilian, but also being exposed to African music. It's something that I own. It's always what I carry as a motivation to continue doing what I do. Like people, I think when people connect to culture the way, the way they don't expect to, they can remind us of our own humanity. And that was, to me, that was Angola, and it transformed my life. I want to keep, bringing this possibility to other people by the arts that we present. So the music industry, I realized when I moved here, it's, of course, we all know it's a male-dominated industry, and that it's like I said before, it's on my day-to-day. I can feel that. For example, like there's still, when it comes to deciding a lineup of a festival like Summer Stage, one may think, oh, it's it must be such a grateful job. It's easy, who doesn't want to play in Central Park? And it's not like that. There's so many stakeholders, and there's so many, in the company itself, but also in the industry, and people with strong opinions and people with, with power that can interfere with our decisions. And even that, like, when you think about how do we choose the artists? If you think the majority of the artists are represented, it starts by male agents, by men who have been working in the industry for so long. So it's not only like what you see on stage, but if you think of the whole, I guess the whole players in the industry, you see a lot of male presence. So when Summer Stage decided to take the stance of being a gender balanced festival, surprisingly, some people reacted with, but why is this so important? There's a lot of women in the industry. And it's not true. I think people don't see the behind the scenes, like how decisions are made, how artists are represented. And I think by taking a stance, by saying publicly, we're committing to this balance, it caught a lot of attention from a lot of people, like, okay, this is an important topic. And also reminded us internally, when I speak, for example, with an agent and I'm trying to program a book and artist, when I talk to him, in that case, if it's a man, then I say, no, we're committed to this pledge. It starts the conversation at another level. We all rethink, okay, what are our positions? What is the imbalance again? Like, why are we talking about this now? And I have to say, since we started doing this in 2019, I was very proud to have, I started that in the organization, we all committed. And now it's one of the most, like when we're working on our season now this summer, and we're going to announce it next month. And it has been since 2019, of course, the pandemic, it was, we had to be dark for a year, etc. But now we're getting back and continuing their narrative. And the more we say that, we feel that it continues to be very relevant year after year. It wasn't just the first year that we did that. It continues to be relevant. And the conversation, it doesn't stop. It's still needed, and it's still, still productive, and people still resonate with that topic and wants to continue talking about it. So that all to say, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, that like when I see a book like Mila's, it only reinforces and gives us historical basis of the importance of what we're doing. At a festival, you think like in the year 2022, you're still doing this, and it just it gives us the background, I guess, or the basis for not only to do it now, but to look into the future, and with examples, and with the North, where we know what to go for. I hope I answered your question well, Diana. Let me know if you wanted me to cover anything else that I didn't answer. And thank you again.
No, it was amazing. And yes, the idea of activism is pretty clear. And that is something that I never thought before, and changed after reading Mila's book, the idea of how can we be activists and do something, even if it's quietly, even if it's not like officially with the flag saying I'm this, but just by doing it. And I think you answered very well. And I think your job is very important. And yes, programming can be very political, and we should use that. So that's my take on it. I would like to ask Betania to talk a little bit now about her work being a little bit more public. Let's say you just also released this book, right, about this little Black dancer, this child that's a Black dancer, and I would like for you to talk a little bit about that. And even if it's a little bit, I cannot not ask how was to be the daughter of Beatriz Nascimento and being raised with such force, and how did that shape your life, and how you keep bringing this?
Hello, good evening, everyone. Am I okay with my connection? Because I was kicked out and I came back. I think my connection is not so good. Thank you. First of all, about my book, I'm about to release my first book of my own. It's a children's book, and the name is Beta, a bailarina pretinha in Portuguese, and in English would be Beta, the Black ballerina. And the book is actually about my life. It's about my life story as a child. It's a children's book, but it's a little bit of my story from the beginning of dancing until the moment I became a principal dancer. And it's funny because I always wanted to tell my life story, and people have been asking me for years now to write a biography, a memoir. And I was just like, I'm not ready for a memoir. I don't think I'm old enough to do like a biography or a memoir. And also I felt that I want to tell the children first. I want to tell the future first, because as a child, and looking back into my childhood as a ballet dancer, as a little black girl that was the only black kid in the dance studio, I felt, and as an adult looking back, I saw a kid that was already an activist with her body, with her dance, with her dream. So I wanted to tell that story. That story has been always the most valuable part of my life. That's what shaped me. So I wanted to give to the children. I want to give to the families. I want the families to read it together and find out also who was Beatriz Nascimento. First of all, Beatriz was a mom. There was another profession that Beatriz had. It was to be a mother. And she was a mother of a ballerina. What is very peculiar, the mothers of the ballerinas are usually really nuts and crazy. They really want the girls, the daughters and the sons to really do it and really go. And in the beginning, I struggled with my mom. I struggled with being the only black child in the class, and I didn't want to go take class. I had to do ballet because of my orthopedic issues that I had. And I told my mother, I'm just gonna do 1 year and I'm gonna fix my feet and my knees and I'm gonna quit and I'm gonna stop. And she was like, yeah, whatever. And so I wanted to tell this story. I wanted to tell this story of the journey of a child, of the journey of finding yourself through this system that doesn't let you push the doors, or doesn't let you dream further. A lot of people from my generation, it was still, I could feel, even in ballet school, even in Teatro Municipal school, was the biggest school, I could see the other black girls that were with me in class that couldn't really find themselves through, and I was really on a track and on a faster pace. And I remember being with a friend, another black girl, and tell her, let's go, keep your head up, why are you back there, just come over here with me. And she'll be hiding in the back, but I could feel her pressure. I could feel the weight she was feeling. I would already be, the weight is coming and I'm gonna kick the weight out and I'm gonna keep on moving. I'm gonna prove to everybody and to myself that I can do this. And I was really tough as a kid to pursue the classical training. Sometimes in the ballet school, they will say, oh, go take African class. I was like, no, I'm not taking African class. I dance African, I dance Afro at home. I dance Afro in the big parties. I dance Afro. I go to the terreiros with my family. I am not going to dance Afro. I want to take the ballet class. I want to take the classical variations. I want to learn classical music. I want to learn the ballets. And that was my way of activism. So my book tells a little bit of this story, how I pursue the dream and then I end up in America, and how my mother showed me the images of the dance theater of Harlem and of Alvin Ailey, and that made me dream further into become a black ballerina. And that's what I wanted to be after she showed me the images, to be a black ballerina. I wanted to be one of them. I wanted to be in brown tights and brown shoes. I wanted to be part of the repertoire. I wanted to learn George Balanchine. I wanted to learn the neoclassical. And, I was much blessed to have Arthur Mitchell come into my life when I was 14 years old. The company came to Rio and I did the master class with Arthur Mitchell. And that's when he told me that I would have a scholarship if I kept working hard and if I would grow, because at 14 I was like 5 foot tall. And I worked really hard after that. It gave me such an impulse also to be in front of other ballerinas and to have actually Marcia de Castro, who was the first Afro-Brazilian dancer to be in at the Dance Theater of Harlem. And I remember looking up to Marcia and she was translating to me, but I don't remember anything she was saying. All I could remember was her body, her beauty, and the way she was carrying herself. And that gave me, guys, like we say in Brazil, that gave me full power to keep on going and to face the difficulties of being that young, teenager that was pushing the doors every day, every day. It was a everyday battle. So even I didn't know, activism for me back then was what my mother was doing. Activism for me was what my uncles were doing. Activism for me was to be grabbed by my mom and go somewhere and go up to a comunidade, a favela, and go to the samba school with her sometimes, or even take an airplane to São Paulo, and she'll take me into her meetings and she'll say, be quiet, don't talk, don't move, just be quiet. And I'll just sit there and be quiet or just fall asleep. But in my head, in my mind, everything was coming through. And that's how I learned. That was to me the real activism. It was the conversations, the intellectuals, the academia, and that those big people surround me. And I never thought in that moment, yes, I'm an activist. I never thought about that until later. I looked back and I said, wow, I was doing that too on my own way with my art. So that's what I'm showing a little bit in the book. And what I'm showing in the book as well is how was to be Beatrice's daughter. And to be Beatrice's daughter was and to be still is to respect the space, was to respect the space. It was to listen. I don't know how to. People sometimes they ask me how was it, and usually I don't really have a straight answer. I was born into. Sometimes it's really hard to explain when you were born into that system. So I was born into the Black movement, let's say, and that shaped me through my art because all I wanted to be was to be a dancer. But I was shaped as an activist in my mind, and that took me through my career. And today, still taking me to further areas and to expand myself as an artist, as an activist, because I do consider myself an activist today as well, and as a citizen of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betania. And I just want to ask Mila if she has any questions. Yeah, clap hands, right? Just want to ask Mila if you have any questions for our guests.
I didn't expect you to do that to me, Gianna. You're a terrible student. I'm gonna punish you whenever you're.
I can ask more questions.
But okay,
I want to listen to you after you listen to all of that.
I can do that. but one thing that I find fascinating is Beatriz Nascimento. We've been talking about Betania's mom, and I really, for those of you who are in the US and are not familiar with her work, not only as an activist, but her intellectual work is just impressive. Whatever you can put your hands on that she wrote is just brilliant. And I remember when I first met Betania, actually, I first met her at the Dance Theater of Harlem, and I approached her and I said, because I'm a friend with Ingrid Silva, who is also a ballerina at the Dance Theater of Harlem. So I went there, I approached her, and I asked her if she could give me an interview in my TV show. I'm also a journalist. And Betania went to my TV show, and then she was there. I got really emotional telling her about how much her mom had influenced me. I don't know if she remembers that. I started crying, and it was very embarrassing. Of course she does. I do too, and I'll never forget that very embarrassing moment. And I get sensitive with amazing intellectuals. It's my fault. But I just wanted to build on what Betania said and build on what Paula said, to ask them a little bit if they can say a little more about the role of, Betania mentioned future, and Paula said about the problem in the present and how much you have to address it now to maybe envision something different. And here we are, 2022, still having this conversation and trying to find words and ways of defining acts of activism. And as I said, I remember when I was doing interviews and giving talks about this book in Brazil, people were, in some cases, really bothered, really angry about the fact that I didn't really call her an activist. And for me, it's really tricky to understand to what extent I have even any possibility of calling someone something that they didn't identify as? And why are we still needing those labels in 2022 instead of really celebrating resistance and change? So Betania, you talked about the future in terms of you writing a children's book and hoping that this story can, mean something to new generations. And Paula has said a lot about programming as an act that maybe someone is going to be watching a concert at Summer Stage, and with that is going to think, oh, maybe I could be there someday. I could be there. So in a way, I'm asking about what do you envision with your act? If this is at any point a part of what you're doing, part of the agenda, if you're there thinking that you're going to forge new generations. Betania, you already did with Ingrid, that you did what Arthur Mitchell did with you, with Ingrid, when you went to Brazil, saw her, brought her here, and she's now a principal at the Dance Theater of Harlem and one of the most accomplished ballerinas of this generation. And Paula saw that happening with a tremendous shift during her tenure as a director there. So is this part of your agenda? Is this something that you do consciously, or is this something that just happens to be a consequence of what you're doing in your daily lives?
Betania, do you want to start? Or I guess.
You can go, Paula, you can go.
Okay. That's a tough question. I was thinking of all ways of trying to frame an answer to this, but I mean, of course, I purposefully, when I choosing the artist and having day-to-day conversations, I am always thinking of the impact at the end that this will cause, right? Like, what is the end result that we foresee? But I like to call, like, what I do is all, and I think any business transaction, I guess, anything like, because what we do sometimes is a transaction. We're buying, a show from someone, from an artist. Has in its base, like the basis is personal relationships. So on my conversations, on my day-to-day, I don't know if we call it activism or not, but I'm always advocating for the values that I believe in. And it's always a conversation, because if the artist has the message that I agree with and I believe in, it's a purposeful, sorry, I'm stumbling, but it's, we have intention of the work that we do. And I feel that this is important, because the world, especially in the area where we're living today, where things are so polarized and there's so much misinformation out there, I feel there's a need for us, like, to level the truth. Like, are we all, like, we have to start in the same, like, we should all acknowledge the problems that society has, and then from there, like, what needs to get done, So of course, presenting music, it has as entertainment, like what I'm doing, I also want to bring fun and entertainment, but to everyone. But I also want to spark conversation, curiosity. I want, and if the audience is watching the show, and if they don't get, okay, I don't get exactly what this artist is trying to say, but at least it's gonna spark a question, and it's thought-provoking. And to me, that's what we want to do. We are a public festival, not in the sense that we're not, Summer Stage is not run by the city. It's a private organization, but we are free and open to the public, and we partner with the city so we can do shows in parks, in public spaces. So and the city supports the work we do. So to me, it's not only an honor and a privilege to be able to program in those spaces, but I feel that's my responsibility to bring, what what's right for society.
Well, my answer would be pretty much where I come from. It was never, I wasn't, when I mean where I come from, I don't say just Beatriz, I say also Mr. Mitchell, Arthur Mitchell. And Arthur Mitchell was a trailblazer. And to be a trailblazer, you gotta bring others with you. You don't do by yourself. Today, I am considered a trailblazer in Brazil. My my way of working was always very focusing on myself. When you're a dancer, when you're an athlete, you're very like close in your own world and your own self. You're not thinking about the others so much, but yet you are doing the work of opening the doors, and you are doing the work of giving new information, like just Paula said, and new provocative and questions, and new answers to the world, to the present, into the future. And that's how I felt with Mr. Mitchell while he was using me as one of his dancers. And that's how I felt traveling throughout the world with the company. But the thing is also, I think that is also, you must have a little talent to do that. And I think I consider Arthur Mitchell my second father. And I think I learned so much with him. I learned being in the studio with him. I learned being grabbed by him and taking me to the galas and to the receptions, and having to behave in a certain way, and having to put my hair up, and having to, be in a way that this is, you are one of my kids, you are one of my dancers, and this is how you're gonna represent. And Mr. Mitchell had a very strong phrase that stayed with him, and a quote called that he used to say, "You represent something bigger than yourself." And he used to tell us every time, "You represent something bigger than yourself." And that, I carried that with me through life to the moment I actually got to Dançando Pra Não Dançar in Rio, when I was 6 months pregnant, and I saw Ingrid Silva for the first time. What I saw in Ingrid was the focus, was the talent. And actually, I did see her focus, and I liked the way she focused. And that's what got me to be so interested in her. And I thought to myself, Mr. Mitchell's gonna like her. So I wanna do a video audition of her and send to Mr. Mitchell. Also, because Ingrid, in the ballet world, there is a lot of colorism. And I could tell the lighter skinned girls were more presented. It was more like, how you say, como é que fala em inglês? They were more,
O que você quer
you know,
falar?
they
O
were
que você quer falar, amiga?
more promovidas, vamos dizer, like
Well, got more opportunities, right? Had more
got
opportunities.
more opportunities and more
Visibility, yeah.
visibility. And Ingrid was very much in the back, and I was like, no, because I know what I've been through in Brazil with my skin tone. Right now, I'm kind of I'm light skinned because of this winter. And I could identify myself with Ingrid. So that's one of the reasons. I'm going to be very honest here. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted her to leave the country and to have a bigger opportunity. And with that, other young people came into my life. And today, every other month and week, a younger person coming into my life. Right now, I'm mentoring from here to Rio one of my students. Her name is Anuska Zoe, and she's 14 years old. And I was teaching her at the age of 5. And I am going crazy looking for schools that she can come to the US and have more opportunities and being seen, because she's an amazing, amazing, beautiful ballerina, an amazing artist, so mature for her age, and she deserves a word. And to me, that's trailblazing. I don't know. I learned with Mr. Mitchell. I learned with my mother how to open the doors. That's all I think, is to open the doors for them and just keep bringing them with me. I feel like I was telling my 2 Brazilian dancers that are staying here with me, and a part of becoming the part of my dance family, that I'm the big elephant, the big female elephant of ballet, that I'm just keep bringing everybody with me. And if somebody stays back and stays sad and doesn't want to do it, I'm bringing them with me, and making them go after their dream, because it's very important to pursue your dream here on earth right now. So this is how I do. I don't know how I do. It's a journey. and it's how I know how life goes.
And this also reminds me both discourses, Paula and Betania's, about something Mila writes, that is narrative of intention, and how that lead the way to most of what Dona Ivone Lara did. She had no idea she was being an activist, but she had the intention of doing what she thought it was right. And I'm very happy to be here today, and I'm very happy to be listening to all of this and to have such amazing Brazilian women speaking, and that gives me hope. And a little bit hope of myself too, trying to build a career here and open some paths too. So it's very, very, very a blessing to be here. I would like to ask if you have some questions, if you could start the Q&A.
Maybe if you don't want to put on the chat, and if you just want to open your cameras and ask the question, that's also okay. But I think we have a few more minutes, and we already agreed that we know everyone is tired of Zoom meetings at this point. So if you want to, just throw a few questions to these amazing women that are here. I see many of my students actually here, which makes me very, very happy. So feel free to drop questions in the chat. I even see my dean here, which is fabulous. Thank you, James. Maybe questions from students. Yes, that's a good idea. Any students want to make questions for extra credit in my class, and James and Ulysses' classes too, and Laird's class too. Adriana, did you open your mic on purpose to make a question? If you don't have questions, everyone, it's okay. I think Gianna has a few others, so it's fine. But if you do, I think this is a good time to continue this conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, was it difficult as women for you guys to proceed your career in Brazil? Was it difficult as women?
That's a great question. Betania and Paula, maybe you can reply to this one. For me, it was, I started my career in Brazil as a journalist, and to be very honest with you, it took me a while. I think only after I came to the United States, I started realizing that a few things were connected to gender, and I don't think we had those discussions at the time I was starting my career as a journalist, honestly. It's something that came up, although I always felt like I was a very engaged feminist, and I had so many, I don't know if I should call blind spots, but I just naturalized a lot of the oppressions that we see every day. So I didn't really realize, sometimes people ask me this question, and up to this day, I still feel like, oh, so that was it? Oh, okay. So I think this is a moment when when I moved here, I started realizing those things more often. One thing that I still see is that when I am, especially in academia, I now see lots of women as students, and we know that this is already a majority in universities in the United States, which is a great thing. But I also feel that sometimes the more when you're in a PhD, it's a different situation from when you're an undergrad. So it's depending on the PhD program, sometimes it's very lonely. Depending on your career, it's still very lonely. So I think I defer to what Betania and Paula have said on that. And I think maybe they can add to what I just said more beautifully and precisely.
Now, can I say something? It is towards that questions. Yes, of course, you feel the way, like in the dance world, even the ballerina is this image, that everybody wants to see because we want tiptoes and with turning and doing things on the tiptoe. The men are the ones, mostly men are the ones who run and do the choreography. It's like, I can count on my fingers how many women choreographed on me throughout my whole career. And yes, it's pretty, it's difficult because you have to be in it. I remember being, even in a young age, being tired of having so many men telling me what to do with my body. Well, it was kind of, sometimes very, very frustrating. Men don't understand that maybe, in that time of that month, and you have to be in a unitard, you have to be thin, you have to hold your stomach, you have to pull up, and you're like completely going through, your hormones. It's hard. It was very hard. I could feel that weight very, very much throughout my career. And I remember many times being very, very tired of having to do what men told me to do, like do this and do that. Even like my director and my mentor is a man. And yes, it was very hard. And also as a Black woman, when I went through the hardest time in my career in Brazil before I moved here, and I was still a teenager. I was still 17 years old when I moved here. At the age of 16, I was part of the Teatro Municipal do Rio de Janeiro company. I had joined the company through an audition, a public audition. It was 200 candidates, and they were going to hire 14 dancers, 7 women, 7 men, and I was one of them. I was in 5th place, and yet they didn't want to give me a contract. There was a whole discussion for like hours and hours with the director of the company that time. And then I remember that people were saying, well, but we already have Black dancers in the company. Black dancers were men, not women. And there is a difference of being a Black ballet dancer, a female Black ballet dancer, and a male ballet dancer, because the dance world has few men. So they need men anyway. It's not that they're not going to do things to the Black men as well, but we Black women, we have to compete even more. So the difference was, well, we need men, so we're just gonna let them in, but we have so many girls, you are probably not gonna be getting the contract because we already have Black people in here. But that was not the case. So there was a whole discussion I found out later that happened in that during the trials of the audition. And I finally got into the company because my points, my scores were high enough to get in, and that was the law. And then that's how I joined the company. However, I couldn't stay in the company for a year, and because every day I had microaggressions, I started getting depressed, and my mother took me out. I was still a minor, and my mother took me out of they actually fired me with no reason, and my mother said, no, you're not going ever back, you're not even trying. That's when I had to leave the country. But till today, they're going to say, no, we always have Black dancers in the company. No, you don't have female dancers. So that's a bigger weight. That's a big weight as well. That's a big aspect of it too. So yes, it's been something to be a woman in this profession. Especially in Brazil.
I don't have a lot to add. I think it's beautiful, Betania. Thank you so much for sharing your personal story. I think it's so important for all of us to hear that. The only thing I would say is that, being a woman, yes, there's a barrier, and I think I already spoke a little about it. The one thing that I would add to what I said before is there's definitely a boys' club in this industry. When you talk about programming or producing live events in general, there is you can see like that, men treat men differently than they treat women. And it is what it is, the reality. It's definitely a barrier. And I'm hopeful that things are changing, but it's still what happens today.
Any other questions? I know that Ivora said that, how would you describe the difference and the visibility of being a Black dancer in Brazil and the United States, but I think you already kind of answered that. But if you want to go a little bit
Well,
deeper into.
I wanted to say something that I was planning to say in this live. Is actually kind of stepping out a little bit, and I read in the book about Dona Ivone Lara, is that I grew up in a family of Black women. It was a matriarchal family. My grandmother was the runner of the family. My grandfather was a very calm man, but Dona Rubina was a dictator. She was a general. She was like, ah. And, so my mother had 6 sisters and 3 brothers. So you see, their house was run by women, their family. And I remember growing up hearing about Dona Ivone Lara and how she would be this composer, how she was one of the first. I'll never forget. I don't know how old that was. I remember being very small, like 10 years old. But I remember one of my aunts, Maria Isabel Nascimento, telling us, me and my cousins, and telling us the story of Dona Ivone Lara, Elza Soares, these women that faced this very misogynist world of samba. And I don't know if it was Dona Ivone Lara or if it was Elza Soares that was on the Avenida, on the parade, on the Brazilian parade, and she's singing and she's going on, and then she turns to the judge and she said, "You're gonna have to hear me now." And I'll never forget this story told by my aunt about how these amazing women in the samba world stood for themselves. And that was it's amazing. It was amazing to hear that. They used to tell a lot of stories. There is a lot of oral stories in the Black families, and my family had a lot. I can write a whole other book about it. But I remember this, and reading this book made me smile, and it was almost like my aunt was telling me the story all over again, because it was amazing, and it's such an inspiration. I mean, you cannot go on your life and stand up for yourself without knowing how these women stood up for themselves in that world. So I just want to bring this experience to this beautiful event. Thank you.
Thank you, Betania. Any other questions?
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Betania. And it's funny that one thing that I've been hearing a lot is that people who are reading the book start listening to her. And I feel like that mission accomplished. Like if that makes people listen to her music more and more, that's already amazing. And another question that people have asked a lot is, what is the situation today in Brazil in terms of female composers, women who write samba songs? And I'm working a book chapter, and in which I interview a bunch of those new composers. And it's incredible how 100% of them cite Dona Ivone Lara as this major reference, as this person who's basically told them without saying that it was okay, it was feasible, they could try. But they still talk about it being very lonely, still talk about it being small things that make it really hard. Even what samba is. I remember when I wrote my first book and I talked to Moacir Luz, who is a fabulous samba composer and someone who is very dear, a dear friend of mine whom I love deeply. And I asked him, why there are so few women? And he said, oh, women don't write sambas because they don't go to boutiquins, they don't go to bars to drink for, all night long. So it's not the social expectation. And then I was really wondering, today we won't naturalize what Moacir said, right? We're going to say, whoa, that's problematic. But actually, it is what it is. Our society is made of those little oppressions that we tend to naturalize. We don't even notice. And for me, knowing that people are listening to her and are just doing the work of looking for her work is something that I think is just fabulous. And it just talks a lot to these structures of that really make it so hard for women like Dona Ivone Lara to be heard, having to sometimes scream and stay in the bar at night to say, you're going to listen to my music, or do strategies like the ones that she did, which was having her cousin, male samba composer, introducing her songs as if he had written them so that people could hear the songs. And after a while, after everyone praising him so much, her finally saying, those are my songs. And you have to, você vai ter que me engolir, you're gonna have to listen to what I'm singing now. So yeah, that's a great testimony. And yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, so I don't think we have any other questions, so I think we could wrap it up. And I would say that that was an amazing, amazing conversation about art, activism, and feminism. And thank you so much, Mila, for inviting me to be here. I feel so honored and so inspired right now. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you all. Thank you, Betania, Paula. Thank you, Kathy. Thank Cox. And you guys want to say bye?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gianna, for accepting this invitation. I really appreciate Lydia, Kathy, Vicky, Sebastian, and especially Laird Bergard, the director of CLECOS, who is here with us. Such an honor to have him here. It's like, of course, talking directly from a beautiful ocean, not in New York, clearly, with this background. But really, it was a joy seeing all of you here. So many friends, so many friendly faces, and so many of my students. Really, it's a blast. Paula, Betania, I really appreciate your brilliance, your generosity of sharing your brilliant work and accomplishments with us. And above all, I really appreciate your friendship. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, please, Mila, keep writing these stories. Keep publishing books like this. This is so important for us. And Betania, same to you. Please keep writing and keep sharing your story. And Diana, thank you so much for moderating this panel. This conversation today It was so lovely to meet you. Thank you to Kuni and to everyone. I'm really flattered and honored to be among yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mila. We finally did it. It took 2 years. I'm so happy. It felt like a gap. We were doing it and then pandemic, quarantine, and here we are. I just want to thank everybody for coming, and thank you, Mila. Thank you, Paula, so much for sharing your story. It's amazing. It makes me a proud Brazilian. And yes, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Super happy.
Thank you all. And by the way, someday we're going to do it the way we really envisioned, with a roda de samba, with samba musicians playing the samba in person. It's going to happen. I don't know when, but it's going to happen.
It's the only thing missing today. I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. We love Mila. There's no other way to put it. And so we really thank you all for joining us this evening. And if you're not signed up for the CLECOS newsletter, please let us know. Please email us and we will put you on our newsletter. And our next event, I believe, is March 24th. So look out for that as well. Thank you. Thank you again, everyone.
there was a person arriving now.
I know. Saw that.
Right?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Betânia, muito, muito, muito obrigada. Você é uma estrela, pelo amor de Deus. Que sorte nessa vida. Obrigada, sua maravilhosa. Te vejo já, então, tá? Tá combinado, dia 21. Beijo. Obrigada, querida.
Nada.
Kathy, Lydia, thank you so much. This was so amazing. Thank you. You are really rock stars. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Stay well.
Bye.
Bye.
So Lydia, I know it ends and then it creates an MP, a video. Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, why can't I hear you? Oh, let me stop recording.